What is happening in my shop? Why is my business going down even when I am giving it my best? Hey, God, please help me.
Maureen was the third child in a family of 6. Her father was a carpenter who struggled to find work, and her mother sold vegetables in front of their small house. Life in their family was never easy. Food was always measured, school fees were always delayed, and sometimes Maureen had to help her mother in the market instead of going to school. While other girls in her street dreamed of becoming nurses or teachers, Maureen only dreamed of becoming somebody who could help her family and remove them from shame. She never had the chance to go far in school because her parents could not afford it, so when the idea of learning a trade came, she accepted it with all her heart. She believed that if she could learn something with her hands, she would one day stand on her own feet. From a young age, Maureen loved watching people make hair. She admired the way braids lined up neatly, the way threads and attachments were woven into beautiful styles, and the way customers smiled when they looked at the mirror. She used to stand by the roadside to watch the hairdressers in her area, and sometimes she would beg to hold the comb for them, and that was how her passion started to grow. Her family noticed her interest and encouraged her. But the problem was money. They did not have enough to put her under a good hairdresser. Many times her mother promised, "Don't worry, Maureen, we will find a way." Maureen waited patiently until one day a neighbor told her mother about Madame Gloria, a very popular hairdresser in the city who was known for training young girls. Madame Gloria's salon was one of the biggest in the area. Women traveled from different neighborhoods just to make hair there. She had apprentices working under her, and she was known to settle them well when they finished. That was how Maureen's hope began to shine. If she could enter that salon and complete her training, her life could change. Even though the fee for registration was high, Maureen's father borrowed money from a relative and her mother added her market savings. With tears of joy, Maureen watched her parents sacrifice for her future. She promised them that she would never waste the opportunity. On the morning she was taken to Madame Gloria's salon, Maureen could not stop smiling. The salon was painted in bright pink and white. The signboard read Gloria's Touch, Home of Beauty. Music played softly inside, and the air smelled of relaxer, hair cream, and perfume. Maureen felt small as she entered because of the crowd of customers waiting. Her heart was beating fast, but her mother squeezed her hand and whispered, "This is your chance. Work hard and one day you too will have a shop like this." Maureen nodded. Madame Gloria herself was a tall woman with a confident walk and a sharp voice. She looked Maureen from head to toe before saying, "So you want to learn? Fine. But know that this place is not for lazy people. If you are serious, you will succeed." Maureen's spirit lifted. She promised herself she would endure, she would learn, and she would one day be somebody. Life in Madame Gloria's salon was very different from life at home. From the first day, Maureen realized that being an apprentice was not a small matter. She swept the floor, washed dirty towels, cleaned the mirrors, fetched water, and even ran errands to the market. First it was hard. Her hands pained her, her back ached, and sometimes she cried quietly when no one was looking. But she reminded herself that all this was part of the journey. Slowly she began to adapt. She learned how to part hair neatly, how to braid without hurting the scalp, and how to fix weaves so that they looked natural. Madame Gloria was strict and sometimes shouted at her apprentices, but Maureen took it as a lesson. She told herself that if she wanted to become great, she had to endure. The salon was always busy. On weekends, women queued outside waiting for their turn. Some came with children, others came with friends, and some came to gossip while making hair. Maureen learned not only the skill of hairdressing but also the skill of handling people. She watched Madame Gloria laugh with customers, listen to their stories, and give advice like a mother. She noticed how Madame Gloria sometimes bent low to check details in a hairstyle, how she would nod with approval when a job was done well, and how she carried herself like a queen in her kingdom. Maureen admired her deeply and secretly prayed that one day she too would have a big shop filled with customers and apprentices. The other apprentices were many. Some were kind to Ada, teaching her little tricks, while others were harsh and jealous. They sometimes mocked her simple clothes and her village accent. But Maureen was determined not to be distracted. She came early to the salon, worked late into the night, and always tried to give her best. With time, Madame Gloria began to notice her seriousness. She started assigning Maureen bigger tasks, like weaving customers' hair or fixing attachments. Each time Maureen succeeded, her confidence grew. She was no longer the small, shy girl who first entered the salon. She was now a young woman with skills in her hands and hope in her heart. Even when she went home tired at night, she smiled because she knew she was walking towards her dream. The years passed faster than Maureen expected. What began as sweeping and washing hair slowly turned into a full understanding of hairdressing. She could now braid, weave, fix, wash, and style without fear. She had gained the trust of customers, and sometimes they even requested her specifically. Madame Gloria had also grown to rely on her. Whenever new apprentices joined, Maureen was the one guiding them, showing them how to hold the comb, how to divide the hair, and how to keep the customers comfortable. She had become more than just an apprentice. She was a leader among them. Maureen's family were also proud of her. Any time she returned home, she would practice on her sister's hair, and they would laugh at how stylish they looked. Neighbors started calling her to help them with hair during holidays, and even though she was not yet officially free, she sometimes collected small amounts of money. She saved every little coin in a small box, dreaming of the day she would open her own shop. That dream kept her going during the hard times. Whenever Madame Gloria shouted or a customer insulted her, Maureen remembered the picture of her own salon in her mind, a salon with bright chairs, mirrors, and her name boldly written on the wall. That picture gave her strength. At last, the long-awaited day came. Madame Gloria announced that Maureen had completed her training and would soon be settled. The other apprentices clapped, and Maureen's heart raced with joy. Her parents were invited, and preparations began for a small settlement ceremony. It was a tradition for Madame Gloria to give her graduating apprentices some items to start their life. Maureen could hardly sleep as she imagined the dryers, rollers, and mirrors she would receive. On the day of the ceremony, her parents arrived early, her mother wearing her best wrapper, her father smiling with pride. Neighbors also came to witness the occasion, for it was a big thing in the community for a young girl to be settled after years of apprenticeship. Maureen sat in the middle of the salon, dressed neatly, her heart full of gratitude. She looked at Madame Gloria with respect, silently thanking her for everything she had taught her. When the time came, Madame Gloria stood up and spoke proudly about Maureen's journey. She praised her hard work, her humility, and her patience. Then she began to present the settlement items one by one. A small dryer, a standing dryer, combs, rollers, hair creams, a big mirror, and finally, a mannequin head for practice. The crowd clapped at each item, and Maureen's eyes filled with tears of joy. She felt like her life was beginning anew. She had everything she needed to start her own salon, and she could not stop thanking her madam. She hugged her parents tightly, and they too cried with happiness. To Maureen, the mannequin was just part of the normal tools a hairdresser needed, nothing more. She carried it home along with her other gifts, smiling as neighbors cheered for her. That night, as she arranged her new tools neatly in one corner of their sitting room, she whispered to herself, "This is the beginning of my future." In her heart, there was only joy, not the faintest thought that this mannequin carried a shadow that would soon darken her shining dream. Maureen opened her new shop 2 months after the settlement ceremony. It was a small corner space along a busy street, painted bright yellow with her name boldly written on the wall, Maureen's Beauty Touch. The first week was filled with excitement. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers came to support her. She braided hair from morning till night, and at the end of each day, she counted her earnings with pride. Her parents visited often, smiling as they saw their daughter finally living her dream. Maureen arranged her settlement items neatly inside the shop. The dryer stood in one corner, the big mirror reflected light into the room, and the mannequin was placed near the entrance, holding a colorful wig to attract customers. Business seemed promising, and Maureen believed her life was about to change for the better. Every night, she went home tired but happy, telling herself that the struggles of apprenticeship were finally worth it. But soon things began to change in strange ways. The first sign came when customers started complaining. A woman who came for braids said her hair kept cutting mysteriously after she left the shop. Another who fixed a weave-in returned the next day, angry that the hair had fallen apart as if it was never done well. Maureen was confused, because she knew she did everything correctly. Within weeks, more customers left unhappy, some even swearing never to return. At first, Maureen thought maybe she needed to practice more or that she was unlucky with a few customers. But as the complaints grew, her heart became heavy. The money she once counted with joy became little, and some days, no customer even entered her shop. Yet, whenever she looked at her tools, everything seemed normal. The mannequin still stood by the entrance with a wig, silent and harmless, and Maureen had no reason to suspect it was the beginning of her troubles. The problems grew worse. One morning, Maureen came to open her shop and found the mannequin lying on the floor, the wig twisted strangely around its face. She was shocked because she remembered locking the door carefully the night before. She thought maybe rats had pushed it or that she hadn't placed it well. She set it back up and continued her day. But after that, odd things kept happening. The dryers stopped working suddenly, even though they were brand new. The mirror cracked in the middle of the night, though nobody had touched it. Maureen's savings began to finish quickly because she kept repairing or replacing items. People in the neighborhood whispered that maybe she had offended someone who didn't want her to succeed. Maureen shook her head and tried to remain strong, telling herself that every business had challenges at the beginning. She prayed harder, asking God to bless her hustle. But deep down, fear began to grow slowly, not suspecting the mannequin that smiled silently from the corner of her shop. One night, Maureen stayed late in her shop to finish styling a wig for a customer who needed it urgently the next morning. The street outside was quiet, and most of the shops had already closed. Only the dim light of her bulb shone through the window. As she worked, she suddenly felt as if someone was watching her. She turned sharply, but the shop was empty. Her eyes landed on the mannequin standing near the mirror. Its glassy eyes seemed to reflect the dim light, almost as if it was alive. Maureen laughed nervously and shook her head, blaming her tiredness. She continued with the wig, humming to herself. But then she heard a faint whisper, soft like the sound of air, coming from the direction of the mannequin. She froze, her heart beating fast. She listened carefully, but the shop was silent again. Maureen quickly packed her things and rushed home. The next day, Maureen tried to convince herself that it was her imagination. She even told her friend Amaka about it, laughing as if it was a joke. But Amaka did not laugh. She frowned and told Maureen that mannequins should not be kept too close to where someone works at night, because they sometimes attract spirits. Maureen dismissed it, saying she didn't believe in such superstitions. But deep down, her mind was not at peace. That evening, she avoided staying too late in the shop. She worked fast and closed early, locking the door before the sun fully set. Still, her sleep at home was troubled. She dreamed of voices calling her name, and in the dream, she always saw the mannequin standing at her bedside, staring at her with lifeless eyes. Maureen woke up sweating, her body trembling. She prayed before lying back down, but the fear refused to leave her heart. By the third night, the whispers became clearer. Maureen was braiding a customer's hair when she heard it again, a soft voice calling her name. She dropped the comb in her hand, startling the customer. The woman looked around, confused, and asked if Maureen was okay, but she forced a smile and continued the work. After the customer left, she turned toward the mannequin angrily. "If it's you, stop it," she shouted, her voice breaking in fear. The shop became cold, and for a moment, she felt as if something moved inside the mannequin's empty eyes. She backed away, whispering prayers, her whole body shivering. For the first time, she began to suspect that the mannequin Madame Gloria gave her was not ordinary. But she had no proof, only the strange events and the fear that grew inside her heart each passing day. The strange happenings continued until Maureen could no longer bear it. One afternoon, she decided to visit an elderly woman in her street known as Mama Bucola, a respected woman who people believed had spiritual insight. Maureen explained everything, The whispers, the dreams, the cold feeling around the mannequin. Mama Bucola listened quietly, her face serious. When Maureen finished, the old woman sighed and shook her head. "My daughter, not every gift is a blessing," she said softly. "Some people give with their hands but take with their spirits." Maureen stared in shock, not fully understanding. Mama Bucola then explained that certain objects, like mirrors or mannequins, could be used as vessels for evil powers. If someone placed a curse on it, the owner would suffer silently, losing progress no matter how hard they worked. Maureen's heart pounded as the woman's words sank in. She remembered how Madame Gloria smiled when handing her the mannequin, and suddenly, everything began to connect. The poor sales, the endless bad luck, the strange whispers. It all made sense now. She asked Mama Bucola what she should do. The woman warned her not to keep the mannequin any longer, because as long as it stayed in her shop, her life would not move forward. "It is like a chain holding your destiny down." She advised Maureen to pray seriously and find a strong pastor to help destroy the evil power tied to the mannequin. Maureen felt fear grip her chest, but also a small spark of hope. For the first time, she realized she was not imagining things. Something truly evil was inside that mannequin. That night, Maureen could not sleep. She sat on her bed, thinking about everything. She asked herself why Madame Gloria would do such a thing after training her. Was it jealousy? Was it wickedness? Or did she simply want to make sure Maureen never rose above her? Tears rolled down her face as she remembered how much trust and respect she once had for her madam. She knew she could not confront Madame Grace directly, so she decided that the next morning, she would carry the mannequin straight to a church and ask for deliverance. She had no idea what would happen next, but deep inside her, she was ready for a fight. For the first time, she felt courage rising in her heart, stronger than the fear. Early the next morning, Maureen woke up before sunrise. She carefully wrapped the mannequin in an old cloth, avoiding looking directly at its face. With shaky hands, she carried it to a nearby church known for powerful prayers. The pastor on duty, Pastor Daniel, was surprised when she arrived so early, clutching the covered object tightly. Maureen narrated her story from beginning to end, her voice trembling. The pastor listened attentively, his eyes narrowing with concern. When Maureen uncovered the mannequin, Pastor Daniel stepped back slightly. The air in the room grew heavy, and even he could sense that the object carried a strange presence. He immediately called 2 other prayer warriors to join him. "This is not ordinary," he said firmly. "But God is greater than any power of darkness." The prayer session began with worship songs that echoed through the church. Ada knelt in the front row, her heart pounding as the pastors laid hands on her and the mannequin. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The lights flickered, and Ada felt a strong wind rush through the hall though all the windows were closed. She heard whispers again, louder than before, coming from the mannequin itself. "She will not be free, she will not succeed," the voices hissed. Ada screamed, covering her ears, but Pastor Daniel commanded the voices to be silent in the name of Jesus. The mannequin shook violently on the ground as if something inside it was fighting back. Sweat poured down Ada's face as she prayed with all her strength, begging God to set her free. After hours of intense prayers, the mannequin suddenly cracked across the face, splitting from the forehead to the chin. A loud cry, like the wail of a woman, filled the church hall, and then silence followed. The pastors looked at one another, knowing the evil had been broken. Maureen collapsed in tears, both exhausted and relieved. Pastor Daniel lifted her up and said, "It is finished. From today you are free." Maureen believed him with all her heart. She left the church that afternoon without the mannequin. It was burned behind the church, reduced to ashes. For the first time in months, she felt light, as though a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. Walking back home, she knew her life would never remain the same again. The days after the deliverance felt like a new dawn for Maureen. She returned to her shop with a fresh spirit and determination. Though the mannequin was gone, she was no longer afraid because she knew her hands were blessed. Customers began to come again, one after the other, and her little salon soon became busy. Word spread around the community that Ada was gifted in styling hair, and people loved her gentle attitude. She finally had peace in her heart, and each time she entered the salon, she whispered a prayer of thanks for her freedom. The heavy silence that once hung in the shop was gone, replaced by laughter and joy. Months passed, and Maureen's business continued to grow steadily. She saved enough money to buy new equipment and even employed a young apprentice to assist her. Unlike before, she no longer measured her success by material things alone. She had learned that peace of mind and the presence of God were worth more than gold. Maureen sometimes shared her story with trusted friends, warning them that not every gift was truly a blessing. Many were shocked to hear what she had gone through, but they respected her more for her courage. Her parents also rejoiced, thankful that their daughter had survived what could have destroyed her life completely. One Sunday morning, Maureen stood in church, giving her testimony. With tears in her eyes, she said, "I was given something that looked ordinary, but it almost ruined my life. If not for God, I would not be standing here today." The congregation clapped and praised God with her. Maureen smiled, not because of the claps, but because she knew she had been truly delivered. From that day, she lived with a strong faith and a wiser heart. The mannequin was gone forever, but it left behind a lesson Maureen would never forget. Not every gift comes from a good place. With hope in her heart and a clear path before her, Maureen looked to the future with confidence, ready to live her life to the fullest. If this story is relatable to you, please subscribe, like, and share for more stories.